All right, we're here with Tish Shaboya, who is a paralegal at a family law office for Don Wyland. Lots of experience.
Oh, here you go.
Oh, I need the mic. Okay. So I know that the promotion flyer says Don Wyland, the attorney, but she, as attorneys, as happens, had an emergency. But Tish, I've worked with Tish on lots and lots of cases as an advocate. I worked with Don Wyland's office quite a bit. And oh my gosh, there's just it's always hopping with really interesting things going on. And I thought that Tish could shed light on what your daily life is as a paralegal. And you've got anecdotes and stories that we talked about. So I think it's going to be really interesting. If you have any questions, please, we're going to have a question and answer period at the end. That way we could keep it, kind of keep it going. Please drop your name in the chat. I've been told by Sydney to remind you of that. We have an event coming up on Monday, our domestic violence, sexual harassment in the workplace event. The Paralegal Club is hosting that and putting that on. So I would appreciate it if we could all, as a club, show up. That would be great if we could all, show our support. And it's going to be a resource fair. I've got a lot of people involved, including from, pet temporary housing, different legal services, different nonprofits that help with sexual assault, with domestic violence, with all these, issues that come up. So it's going to be a resource fair as well. There's going to be so much information, and there is going to be a sign-up sheet for I've got some attorneys and an LP willing to give free consultations for domestic violence cases during the month of October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I think that's pretty exciting to offer that free resource, which could be life-saving, life-changing for sure. So having said all that, I think I covered everything, and turn it over to you.
I'm not going to try to be nervous here. My name's Tish. I work for Dawn Wyland. She's a family law attorney here in Tucson, and I've worked for her for about 7 years. I actually am a legal assistant, so I did not go to paralegal school. I was a restaurant manager, and I did that for about 17 years. And Dawn was a restaurant manager in her life before attorney. And so she found me at my restaurant and said, I think you have the perfect skills to do this. And I was like, I don't like email. And so she brought me on and I was resisting, but I did start working for her. So I did have to learn from the ground up. So she taught me everything that I learned. And now I'm her exclusive. I do paralegal work, even though I'm not trained to do it. She showed me what to do. I don't do a lot of her core writing, but I will set up pleadings for her and just get things set up. I do all of the answering the phones. I deal with all of our clients. I deal with all of our files. I do all of our exhibits for core. I set up our cases financially. I do all of our investigation of our records. So I've had to learn everything. I'm also, one of my main jobs is a counselor to our clients, because family law is a lot of counseling, which I did not really think about when I started, but I actually am kind of a counselor to them. So I'm the front person that takes care of our clients and makes sure that they're happy and set up I like run her calendar. I deal with the courts. I talk to the JAs. I deal with the clerks. I do all of the background work. I do. She does all the core writing, and she does, of course, and then she does most of the filing, like on the big documents she does. I do a lot of the filing on the smaller stuff. I do all of our financial affidavits, and just, yeah, I probably do the job of about 3 people, actually. So I normally, probably this would be broken out into 3 people. You would have a paralegal who'd be setting up her documents. Then you would have somebody who's answering the phones and doing the calendar. And then you would have someone who's doing exhibits and disclosure. But I'm all those people into one person. So it's kind of my nature to be organized. I think she wanted me to work for her because I have management skills and I have multitasking skills. Because when you work in restaurants, she knew, because she had been a restaurant manager, we have to handle people. So you have to be personable. I needed to multitask always. I have 10 things going in my head at once. And then be able to manage and track all the things I need to track. So she knew I had the core skills to do it, but she had to bring out the rest. So Yeah. I'm also do all of our tech. I did not know anything about computers before I started this job, but I had to learn on the ground. So I do all of our tech. I set up everything in our office. I run, if we have any kind of technical issues, I figure it out, fix it, run it all. So yeah, that's kind of like what I do. Um, what do you want me to talk about? Just in general? Yeah. Yeah. So I was telling her there's so many things I would have to say about what I do. There's a lot that goes into this. I think one of the skills that I needed the most that I realized that was so important was being organized, making sure that you're keeping track of everything you're doing. It's so critical in law because if you don't send that email or you forget that piece of disclosure or you forget to tell the attorney somebody called or everything I track through email, everything. So if I get a phone call and I send her an email, so and so called, this is what's going on. The disclosure that's coming in. I have to make sure that I'm tracking all this disclosure coming in from the clients, making sure that it's all getting out. Sometimes, you have piles everywhere of paper. It's like, how are you going to organize these piles of paper? What is your system? So setting up these systems so that I don't miss anything. Because if they get into court and they're missing something, or the other side tries to accuse you of not sending something, then that's my nightmare. Because then Dawn has to come back and say, hey, they're saying they didn't get this disclosure. My worst nightmare is that I didn't send it. So I am super like, I double check, recheck. And then when that, hearing's coming up or trial's coming up a week before, I go back, I double check all my emails and make sure, oh, I sent it. I sent that disclosure. Yes, I sent it. Yes. So I'm checking to make sure I sent it. Then I know when she gets to court, if she's accused of not providing that disclosure, I can say, I know I sent it. I will get you the email. I've done it before. She's come back and said, they said you didn't send it. I'll go back and I'll find that email and I will get it to her and we send it over or file it with the court showing that it was sent. They just missed it or whatever, a system on their side, they didn't catch it. So, but that to me was one of the biggest things. I don't ever want her to get to court and say that something wasn't provided or I had done something that was critical to the case. Because sometimes it is critical because that piece of evidence was a huge piece of the case and it can sway the judge. And so it's really important. The disclosure. So there's been some times when disclosures come in from a client, when I'm assessing disclosure, I'm looking at it and seeing, okay, everything, all the pieces we need for the case. In family law, a lot of our disclosure is centered around financials. So it's based either on financials and children or just financials. So if we have clients that don't have minor children, everything's just financial. So we're just collecting financial documents from our clients and then we're assessing what happened, where they're at, what the numbers are that they're going to use to divide the assets. And so we're pulling all this financial disclosure. When you have children, we're doing all the financials and all the stuff for the kids. So that'll include like their grades, if they have disabilities, they have other doctors on board, they've got mental disabilities, we're pulling on all the records for the mental. Sometimes it's the mental disabilities of the parents. If there's alcoholism, if there's drug addiction, we're pulling in records on their drug addiction, all the things that come with being parents. A lot of the disclosure when there's children is going to be text messages. A lot of it's communication. A lot of parents are not good at communicating with each other. And so we either have to calm them down and try to get them on. They have parent apps now. There's one called Our Family Wizard that we love that gets the parents in a central location so that they can learn to communicate with each other and not fight. So when they're on text message, they're used to shooting back super fast. Did you bring Bobby's lunch? It's like, well, I forgot. Or I can't believe you forgot. I can't believe you forgot. This is exactly what I'm talking about. And so then they're going back and forth and fighting like when they were married. And it's like, we have to tell our clients, remember, you're not married to this person anymore. Your communication cannot be like this. And so we try to get their communication under control. So we use apps. There's a Parenter app. There's Our Family Wizard. There's another one that will actually review your responses before you send it and approve the responses because they have a hard time controlling themselves. And so with parenting, it's trying to get them to understand you're a two separate entity now what's appropriate in your communication, and try to calm things down so the kids can start to live a normal life going between two houses. When you have an alcoholic parent, we've had a lot of cases. We deal with a lot of DV cases, and a lot of those cases, you have a parent who's addicted, or they're an alcoholic or something like that. And so we use something called iSober. There's a couple of different ones you can use, and that parent has to blow into an iSober device before they have their parenting time, and then during their parenting time, they're monitored for alcohol intake. Sometimes they have to do regular drug testing if they're going to have parenting time, so we're tracking all of that for court. With the disclosure, a lot of times parents or even just clients who are financial will send me something and I won't think it's important because I'm going through it and I'm like, that doesn't seem that important, but I'll disclose it anyway. It'll sometimes end up being the key to their case. And I was like, I didn't even think it was important, and so not judging what's coming in, just disclosing everything and being responsible, even if you think that's not important. When you get to the trial, it may be the critical piece of evidence that you needed in that trial. So sometimes it's, some kind of document that had to do with the house, and, they're saying that they don't have a right to that home or whatever. And it's that one piece that shows that, yes, they do have a right to that home, or yes, they do have a right to whatever it is. So I try not to judge what's coming in. I'll just try to just disclose everything they send, even if I don't really understand it or think it's important. A lot of the phone calls that I'm receiving are parents in panic. I get a lot of people, they're in a panic situation. DCS just been called, or he took the kids and he won't return them, or a holiday's coming up and nobody can figure out the parenting plan and who's supposed to do what on what holiday. And so we're trying to help them navigate their parenting plan situations. So I do a lot of upfront dealing with clients and trying to talk them down. They'll be crying sometimes, these are serious situations. The police are involved, the police are there, the DCS is involved. And so we have some very high conflict cases. Dawn is a bleeding heart, my attorney. And so she takes on a lot of pro bono cases. And she does a lot of work. And I'm like, Dawn, we need to take some paying clients now. And so I'm always like, we're kind of getting on the edge of we need money. And so then I'm filtering through the people who are calling looking for help. So we take a percentage of high financial cases. So right now we have a lot of high financial cases, and those clients, we're making money off those cases. Then we have our little ones that we're supporting on the side, and Dawn isn't getting paid for those. Maybe up front she got a couple thousand, but then after that, it's like we're not ever really going to get paid on those cases. She's done thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of free work because she does not want to leave people hanging, and she wants to help them. And she sees these kids who really need help, and we just can't leave them floundering in these situations. So we try to get them as stable as we can before we get off the case. So sometimes it'll take a year or so to get them like stable where they're good. And so, yeah, we try. And then we just kind of take payments from them, whatever they can pay $50 a month or whatever. We'll let them pay $50 a month and just kind of keep that going for a long time. We try, you can stay on these cases. Okay, so sometimes we get these kids and they're one. And so we'll stay on these cases until they're 15, 16, 17. And we'll maintenance them for a lifetime. So family law cases are not like criminal. It's not one and done, come in, get it done. It's a year, it's a year and a half. These people are with us for a long time. Some of these clients, we've been trying to help them for 5 years, 6 years, and we've had the same clients all that time. Their cases will be high conflict to start, and then they'll get settled down because they've issued orders on them. And so we just kind of maintenance them. And so they'll come back for, oh, I have an issue for this, or, oh, he's not paying child support, so we have to go in for enforcement. So then they'll kind of crop back up for that. But they're long-term cases that keep going. Or we'll have a plan. Like we have one client that moved to Florida, and her children, the court ordered for the children to stay here. Relocation cases in family law are really hard. They'll try to keep the kids in Arizona. They don't want the kids to leave because they have jurisdiction over them. And so it's really hard for parents that want to leave the state and the other parent's going to stay here. Most of the time, those kids are going to end up staying in Arizona and the other parent will just have to move. And then their parenting time, they'll get summers, they'll get spring break, fall break, and Christmas break. And so the kids will go with that other parent for that period of time. So we do have a female client who left her kids here with the dad, which is kind of different. So she moved to Florida and the kids go to visit her. And right now we filed a modification 4 years later for those kids now to go to Florida. So the judge kind of set it up that the mother, when the kids were in junior high, he kind of made it sound like those kids should go to mom after, they were going to junior high. So we knew we were going to go in for a modification 4 years ago. And then we just kept talking to her and we filed for that modification for her to get her kids back. So it looks like the kids are going to go back. So we set up cases knowing that in 5 years we're going to file for a modification, or we kind of have a plan going forward because they don't always go the way we want them to. But it's worth the fight for these parents who want to have their kids. The financial cases are easier because it's just finances. So in Arizona, it's pretty much 50-50 across the board for everything you own. So we just have to collect all the information and then we fill out an inventory of property and debt. And that tells us, this is one of my main things I do is fill out their financial affidavits. I work with them to fill out the inventory of property and debt. And we go through and we get all those numbers for the day of service, what was in all those accounts. And then we have to get the appraisal on the home and all of those things. A lot of times the home is sold, especially in this economy, because a lot of our clients don't have the means to be able to refinance the house. It's very hard to get refinanced now. And so the home has to be sold and the proceeds divided in most cases now with some of our disadvantaged clients. If they're more advantaged and they have 401ks and they have retirements and pensions and things like that, then they can use those pensions to offset the home so that they can keep the house. But if you don't have any of those things, then you can't really keep the house. It has to be sold because nobody can pay the other person. And the only way to divide the assets is actually sell the asset. So I hate when that has to happen, but because it's so hard to find a place now in Arizona that's cheap enough to live in. I mean, there's nowhere to even rent sometimes. These people can't even afford the rent. So offsets in family law. Like military pensions, things like that, those are the greatest cases because they have a lot of money to work with. It's like Raytheon employees, when we get those Raytheon cases, there's usually huge retirement funds there that we can work with to try to offset other things. So someone can keep the house, or, they can work with the offsets to try to make things balance out without anybody having to really pay cash to the other person. So there's no swapping cash in the hands. That's the best, because who can come up with 10? Yeah, so when we do the inventory of property and debt, you have the home, the pensions, the bank accounts. So you're listing all of their assets, their cars, everything's listed. And so it's pretty much divided 50-50 all the way down with all the numbers. So if you had $10,000 in your bank account, he would get 5 and she would get 5. And so basically it's like a credit in your column. So if you have a credit of 5 and a credit of 5, right? So they're balancing everything out. So if the house, everybody, you each get 50, and then he has a pension and she has none. So he has $150 pension or $150 401k, 150,000 401k, and she had nothing. So they would move that money, like she would get more in the 401k. Like if he's going to keep the house and he's going to pay her 50,000 to keep the house, then she would take more out of the 401k to offset the house. You see what I'm saying? So she would get 50,000 more. So if there's 150,000 in the 401k, she's entitled to 75 and he's entitled to 75. But she would get an additional 50 if he's going to keep the house. So she'll get the 125 instead of just 75. See what I'm saying? So they'll offset so that then he doesn't have to pay cash out of pocket, but she's still getting her money. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's just a money game. So a lot of times we had a really serious case where the debt was so high. They had no assets. The only asset they had was their house. And but then they had $100,000 in credit card debt and car debt. I mean, that's what we're seeing a lot of is debt. So you've got, all this, I mean, 2 Home Depot cards, Target card. I mean, they just every card they could apply for, they applied for, and they had it, and they were all maxed out to the max. Never seen anything like. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's nothing. There was no solutions. There was no offsets. There was nothing we could do. It was like basically, how much debt are you taking, and how much debt are you taking, and everybody had to shift the debt to who was going to pay what debt. I mean, that's all that was left was debt. So I just, I'm really against credit cards and debt, and because I've seen some really bad situations. These people were living in poverty. The husband was able to make it out of that situation because he worked for Raytheon and he made $125,000 a year. Yeah, he had debt, but in the end, he's going to do okay. She was the one who was working at Circle K and has got mental illness and all of these things on her side. And so she ended up with a lot of the debt because she was going to bankrupt the debt. And so what ultimately happened is that they said, okay, you get this debt, knowing that she's going to bankrupt that debt. So she did bankrupt that debt, and she's still working at like TJ Maxx. I just saw her not that long ago, and she's working at TJ Maxx trying to make ends meet, but she's got severe mental illness that was just tore her family apart. And she was cutting, and she ended up in the mental hospital, I think twice during our case. And we did the best we could. Sometimes you can do the best you can, but you can't fix them. But you can just do the best you can for the kids and try to get everybody into a stable place where they can at least function. And the kids can hopefully have a good place, in their future. So that one, she ended up not being, her children didn't want to talk to her anymore. So we see some really sad cases because she really loved her kids. She was a really good mom. She just had really bad mental illness. So we see a lot of that. And then a recent case we had a mom who was a severe alcoholic. Her intention was to be a good mom. We represented the dad, and he was doing everything for the daughter, who's about 15. And the mom would pop out of her alcoholism, and then she would say, she'd send all these emails, and she had an attorney. And so all of a sudden it was like she woke up. Like we were all functioning in this case, and then it was like, boom, she woke up today, So then it was like she sent emails and text messages and just start ranting and raving at everyone and stir the case up and stir the daughter up and demand parenting time. And it was like she just didn't know that she was actually doing that because she was in such a stupor with her alcoholism that she would just kind of rage and come out of that and kind of, so she's kind of straightened herself out in the end, and then she went back into her alcoholism, and so the daughter isn't really seeing her right now. So we see a lot of really sad cases. And I'm happy that we're allowed to be part of them, because if you don't have an attorney involved, a lot of times these kids just get taken away and the parent never sees that child again. So we do our best to try to even out the parenting time to help everybody. The financial cases, those ones are okay. We're seeing a lot of elderly divorces come in, people that have been married, 40 years, and then they're filing for divorce after 40 years. It's like, why? I don't understand why now. But I think, they just, a lot of times they find somebody else. And so they, or call it quits because they find someone else, or they want someone younger, or whatever it's going to be. And, they have quite a bit of money, so it's not as sad, but it is sad because their marriages are ending. And so we're just trying to divide what's there. So what else? Questions?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So what if a couple isn't married, but they bought a house together, and one of them the other party agrees to get the other person?
Okay, so a lot of times in those cases, there's only one person on the house anyway. So what we find is, let's say they put it in his name because he was the financial support. So usually it's just in one name. So if it's in two names, I haven't seen that actually. We always see where it's the mortgage is usually in that person's name and then they're on the deed. So, because when you're married, usually it'll say husband and wife and both of you are on the deed, or it's just one person. So if that person, okay, we had this case where They had lived together as a married couple for 10 years. They had kids, everything, but they never got married. And so he was financially growing his business and this amazing realtor and making, $300,000, $400,000 a year. And she was a stay-at-home mom. So then one day he got an addiction issue, and he's a functioning and still functioning person in Tucson community that is very like prestigious. But he had an addiction issue, but who cares? He makes money, he's having fun, he's going to casino, nobody cares. So he found somebody else, and then he decided he wanted to kick her to the curb. And so she was just a sweet, sweet lady. And she was raising the kids and everything. And all of a sudden one day he's like, I don't want you anymore. Just get out of my house. I'm done with you. And so that's when we come on board, and she has nothing. And so we have to have that hard conversation to tell her, we know that you supported him for 10 years. We know that you bought that house together. We understand that you've been a stay-at-home mom, but the law does not support your situation. So it's basically like you were just his girlfriend for 10 years, and she's not entitled to the house. She wasn't entitled to the car. She wasn't entitled to the business. She wasn't entitled to any of the retirement, nothing. She had to leave with the shirt on her back and these kids. And that was it. And it was like, we're sorry to have to say this, but this is the reality of the law. And so she did leave the house. She had to try to find a place to live and everything. We got her a great temporary support. So all we can do is do a child support case on that. And then we did an upward deviation of child support because we were able to prove his finances. So because he's a business owner and he can do whatever he wants with his finances, we cannot subpoena, I can subpoena Raytheon and prove that somebody makes $125,000 a year. No problem. Fine. Subpoena a Raytheon case, great. If you are a real estate agent and you have multiple entities that you are working from and you can hide your money, it's hard for me to find your money. So I can't really prove that you make $300,000. So that was our problem in that case, is because I had to try to find out how much money he really made. And so we had to subpoena every bank we could think of to see if we could figure out where his money was coming from. And so that was a heavy base financial case because our client is disadvantaged, but she has no entitlements to any of his income. So it's totally a child support case. And to prove our upward deviation, we have to keep proving that he makes this much money. Well, now he's gotten creative. So she had a child support upward deviation order of I think she was making $1,200 a month because we could prove he was making that. Well, he's had 3 years to pretty much hide all his money. So then he came back in and filed a motion saying he needed a modification of child support because he's broke and he's making no money and he can't pay $1,200 a month anymore. And so we just went in last year on this case. So we went back and we have the same judge. John Assini's been on the bench for a long time. He's still on the bench. It doesn't seem like he's going anywhere. He's had this case from the beginning. And a lot of times in family law, our judges are rotating. But John Assini's been on the bench so long, his cases never rotate. So we can do cases in front of John Assini for 7 years. He remembers all of these cases. And so we came back in. Of course, he remembers this case. And because we were able to actually prove that he had an addiction issue. Because of course he came in his 3-piece suit. He looked great. And he looks like an upstanding person in society. It's not like anyone's going to really question that. And he can talk a good game. But he wasn't a criminal. So he's not criminal minded. So he did really dumb stuff. He went and bought, that you can drink that drink that'll clean your system so that when you go to the bathroom, it won't show that you did drugs. So he went and bought that. He bought a shampoo to clean his hair in case we did a hair follicle test. He did all this stuff. And so we got his credit card records and he told the judge, nope, I'm not doing cocaine. I haven't done it. And Assini was like, okay, I'll believe you. So we're going to do a test and then we'll see. And we'll be back in 2 months. So they did the test. And of course it was dirty. He was way dirty. And we got the records back from our subpoena. And the subpoena showed where he bought the shampoo, where he bought all this stuff. I mean, he went in and bought on his credit card. I'm like, this guy is not a criminal. I mean, he did not know what he was doing. And so we were able to prove that he had done that. And Assini was not. pleased at all because he had been like bold-faced lied to in court. And he said, if you're lying to me, you better be ready. And so that's why we ended up getting that $1,200 child support order. But when we went back in, he tried to say that I'm so broke. I'm living, on rations. But he's living in like an $800,000 home and driving fancy cars. And I don't. So we ended up subpoenaing the same bank that we subpoenaed before. So when we went through those records, this is me doing all this, going through these records. I go in and I'm looking month to month, watching his activity. We also got the checks. So we see all the checks he's writing, all the checks that are coming in and all the checks that are going out. So it looks super clean. I mean, he did a good job of trying to keep it clean. I was like, yeah, there's not a lot here. I mean, yeah, he eats out a lot. Him and his wife eat out. It's ridiculous how much they eat out. And I added that up. And so we kind of were going that direction. They're living this lifestyle, but I could see holes in the financials. What I saw was, where's the mortgage payment? Where's the electricity payment? Like little holes that I could see. Or every once in a while, he'd pay the Capital One bill. But then 3 months, and then he'd pay it again. And I'm like, what's going on? There's like, I can see there's other accounts by the holes, is how it's like what they call forensics, financial forensics. So I could see the holes in the patterns. And so I'm like, there's something here. There's something here. I spent hours and hours looking at records. So I went to the checks and started looking at the checks. Well, he was writing checks to himself from other accounts that we hadn't seen. And so what I could see is that there was another bank involved. And so because there was one check that I could see had an entity that he had, like, when we went and looked at the Corporation Commission website, between him and his wife, I think they had like 85 LLCs. And so they were funneling money through all these LLCs. And so we printed out all those LLCs, and he was paying to keep those LLCs up. So we could see 50, 50, 50, 50, 50 for all the LLCs. And then we could see what bank he was paying those checks from, because he was transferring money back and forth. And so I did one subpoena, I think it was to Chase Bank, and I had not subpoenaed them before. And boy, when that came in, I was so excited, because it was like we hit the gold mine. It was like he had funneled about $300,000 in funds through one account, one of these LLCs. And then he stripped the LLC and let it die. And right when he was like planning to go to court in September, he stripped it out and stopped funneling money through it. So he has other LLCs, but I can't find every bank. I can't find. All I needed to prove is that he had funneled $300,000 in a year through that account. And so we were able to go in and say, look, he's saying he's broke and he's a pauper, but he funneled $300,000 through one account that he did not disclose. And so that helped our case to get the child support order that we needed for our lady who's disadvantaged. So that's kind of how financial forensics works in family law. I do a lot of that, just kind of looking at what people are spending and seeing if it's on the up and up. And if it's not, where's your money going? Especially if they're saying, oh, I don't got money to pay. So that's kind of, and then so a lot of people, especially young people your age, aren't advocates for marriage. But family law attorneys are advocates for marriage, because as a female, usually you're the one who has the baby, you're the disadvantaged person in the household, at least for 10 years, because you've got to raise those kids. And he's out making money, and he's out filling up his 401k and, doing all of that. And then for the woman, you're at home like, oh, I'm not really promoting my career. I'm not really doing anything right now. But, one of these days I'm going to go back to work. Well, then all of a sudden he's done with you, or you're done with him, and then it's over. If you're married, then you get part of his 401k, you get your portion of the house, you get the car, you take it with you, all of those things. If you're not married, you're hurting yourself, because you can walk away with nothing, because they don't care if he built his 401k. You're not entitled to any of it. So John always says, I'm an advocate for marriage. I think that women should get married because it protects you. Marriage is designed to protect you. It's an entity that protects both parties. And so it is important to go ahead and get married, unless you're going to be individually wealthy and, but a lot of times you have children, and when you have those babies, you want to stay home with them. You need 3 years, 4 years, 5 years at home with them. They need you, and so you stay home. So, yeah. get married.
So I just want to clarify that he did remarry after your client?
Yeah, the one, our disadvantaged client.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he never married our client, who was
I
10.
thought that too. Yeah. He didn't marry her, but
He didn't marry her, and then he had been cheating with the woman he's now married to, and so they ended up getting married. So he is married now, but he never married our client. So yeah, that was really hard case because she was so sweet, but it was the highest child support order I've ever seen that we've gotten in unless the person's making like $800,000 a year, that's different. But in this case, it was the highest one I've ever seen. So usually they average between, I don't know, 550 to 750, not real high. So yeah, it was great.
I could see you were getting excited about being a detective.
Yeah.
And, you know, family office can be exciting too. I mean, it might not sound exciting to go through banking house, but when you're trying to find something to help somebody else's
Yeah.
life and their children's life, and there's a lot on the line,
Yeah.
it is exciting.
It's really important. We just went back on another case, and real quick, I found he had attached a bunch of financial documents to a motion he filed with the court. Well, we're not supposed to attach those, but pro pers don't know the rules, and so they just attach stuff. And so he filed with, I mean, sometimes they attach like birth records and social security statements and stuff with like serious information on it. And so we have to go back and file a motion to seal because they filed all this stuff. Well, he did that, but then he was trying to prove his income or something on there, and he attached some documents that I could see he had a couple LLCs, and he's another private owner. And I told Don, look, he attached these, and they prove that he has LLCs. And so she's like, thank God you saw those, because now we're going back because we're like, we found these, and now we got to do some more work. So, yeah.
On the chat, we had somebody ask, what about clients who refuse to even talk to the other?
Like, and refuse to talk to the other side.
Yes,
like with
I believe
kids.
that's what it means.
Yeah. So, I mean, they can function without talking, but a lot of times you have to at least talk about, should these kids go to this school or that school? So they do have to respond. You can get people to respond on a minimal, just surface level, or what court orders will say a lot of times is you're allowed one email a week. So each parent's ordered to email at least once a week to say, oh, this happened with the kids, or that happened with the kids, or what about this, or what about that? So they have to communicate at least once a week. So we will have those orders that says they have to communicate. Yeah, you have to have an email. Sometimes you have an abusive person who likes to abuse the other person through text message, or they'll abuse them through emails. And so we'll try to narrow their communication. Like, you can only talk about kids. You can't talk about anything else. Like, we'll try to narrow it down so they can't abuse the other person. Because a lot of times the text messages can be really, really awful. And it'll spin our DV clients, it'll spin them into a spin. And so if they say something because they were used to being under that person's control, that person knows exactly what to say. And then our client will start to spin out of control. And so they'll call me just panicking, And so then I'll say, okay, we're going to take a deep breath right now. This is where the counseling side comes in, because you don't realize when you do law how much counseling you do, especially in family law. And in criminal law, I think it's a little more sharp, but in family law, we have to be a little more squishy. And so I have to calm them down and say, okay, let's breathe. I'm like, we're just going to deal with what's going on today. We're not going to think about tomorrow. We're not going to think about yesterday. I want you to just focus on today. What are you going to do? You're going to make dinner. You're going to do homework. And then you're going to put your kids to bed. And that's all. That's all that's required of you today. So you don't need to think about this. And so I try to get them calmed down. And then I'll tell them, don't look at your phone. Don't look at your emails. Just stay calm. Or I send them to you. Yeah, because they do get really worked up. So we do see a lot of that in family law. Go ahead. Yeah, so a lot, Dawn does. Dawn bills all her hours. So a lot of times when I'm dealing with clients in crisis, these are the clients that don't really have money anyhow. I do log that I talk to them, and I'll put on there I logged for 30 minutes, but I don't charge them for that time. So a lot of what I do is just part of what we do. Like if I process in documents, I'm processing in orders and motions, and so I'm doing all of that work as well. So I'm processing them in, and then I'm emailing to clients and attorneys. All that work is included in the cost. The things that I really charge for is if the client calls me a lot. So I have clients that call me for everything. So I'll send them an email with their motion, and then they'll call me and say, "Oh, I saw you sent an email with the motion." I'm like, okay, yes, I did. Well, what's this? What's that? Every time I send them an email, they call me. And I'm like, the reason I sent the email is so that you can see it, but we don't need to talk about it. So then I'll start charging them because they're excessively calling and taking up my time. And so then that way they can kind of see that it's Donald say, start charging them because they keep calling and taking up your time and talking to you about stuff that's not important. So I do that. But when it's a DV client, I'm not going to charge it for that 30 minutes. And then the other thing that costs the clients a lot when I work on their cases is their disclosure. I mean, I'll charge $300-400 if I'm doing investigating, like I was forensic investigating. That's like $800-900. If I spent 8-9 hours doing that over a period of days, that costs $800-900, $1,200 for me to do that. So it'll be real big chunks of when I'm working on their case. Disclosure, like initial disclosure, will cost anywhere from $500-600 for the client for me to do that. So like I'll tell them it save you money if you just do your financial affidavit, but if you want me to do it, it'll probably cost you $100 because I'll have to spend an hour doing their financial affidavit. So
Another question from the chat. What do you do with clients who say they only have a private attorney for limited scope? Do you still talk to them or do you have them have their limited scope attorney call them?
okay, so we're a one attorney firm. She does go with limited scope on certain clients. They pretty much get full access to us during that time. Like we'll come in limited scope for one hearing, or we'll come in limited scope for, just child support. And so we'll deal with them on just those issues. And then a lot of times they're pro per on the rest of their case. They only want us for a certain thing. So we will just deal with them on that. Once we're done with them for that hearing, then we just file a notice that we're off the case. And they usually do stop right there. So sometimes Dawn, because I told you she's a bleeding heart, so she just keeps going on the case, or she'll come on full scope and pro per the rest of the case full scope because she'll see that they're not going to make it on their own. And so she'll try to help them at a discounted rate. So sometimes she'll just discount her rate. Right now she's at $325, but then she'll discount her rate to $125 for disadvantaged clients to try to help them out. So, yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
What legal research tool do you guys use here?
Legal research tool?
Yeah, do you have like Nexus, Uni, do you use Westlaw?
Dawn uses Westlaw. She's exclusively Westlaw. She loves Westlaw. So no matter how much it costs, they raise their rates sometimes. She's like, I don't care. Like that is her place to go find everything. Westlaw is her thing. So for me, I don't do any of the legal research. Yeah, because like I said, I'm a legal assistant with some paralegal responsibilities, but I'm not a paralegal. I don't write her documents or anything. I do go in and I change her documents. Like if I do a pretrial, I go in and I fill everything in for her, kind of set it up, and then she goes in and finishes it. Yeah, but I'm three people in one.
So how did you learn to do the financial forensics?
Curiosity.
So,
Yeah, just a lot of time looking at it and talking to clients. And, I think that case that we had, I told you that had so much debt. And that was a very financially dense case because I had to collect all the financials on all of that debt. And yeah, that I went through a lot of financials on that, trying to figure out what they did with their finances and having to come down and come to all those numbers. Because a lot of times what you find is people don't face the reality of their own financial situation. So when you tell them, I need you to fill this financial affidavit out, they get real freaked out. And once they write it all down, they don't even write it all down. And so then I have to go back and tell them, okay, what about this? And they're like, oh yeah, I have this bill, or oh yeah, I have that dentist bill, or I've got this other credit card. I didn't think it was important. It's like everything's important. And so I think out of curiosity, and having to go through and do the records to fill out our clients' information, I had to figure it out. So, and doing these subpoenas and having to figure out how nefarious people can be with their finances is crazy. I mean, we've had clients that they've had full separate lives, apartments. They've got full credit cards on the side where they're functioning with basically almost another family. They have their family going, and then they've got a girlfriend on the side, and they're like have a separate credit card, a separate apartment, a separate everything for her. And so then we're kind of like can see both these worlds functioning at the same time. So these divorces, like, it's a no fault state. So it doesn't matter that they had a girlfriend. So no one's going to hold them at fault for that. But then they also wasted finances. So we have to figure out if we have a financial waste claim. So how much of a waste claim do we have? Did they spend on this apartment and this girlfriend and going to baseball games? One guy got caught because he was on video at a baseball game with the girl. He caught the ball and he was there with her, and that's how he got caught. And that's how his marriage ended. Yeah, because he had been maintaining her on the side. So I told these guys later, I'm like, you can't make this stuff up. I'm like, this stuff is real. This is what's really happening out there, So
She had a long relationship on her back. If he had put at least one of his businesses in her name, because I think women-owned businesses get a tax, deduction or whatever,
yeah.
how would that have changed
Bye. Thank you.
our situation? Because I know of a family that, I believe that was the situation. He owned a business, they raised kids, the whole thing, but they never married, but I think he had to go ahead and file for divorce and the whole thing. And I can only think it's because he put the business in her name, otherwise. Okay.
Like in Arizona, okay, so there's different states. So a lot of times it depends on what state they were in, what the law is, if it's an Arizona case or not an Arizona case. Arizona, she would have a business. And like this guy, he would have stripped that business out and there would be nothing left for her to really go after. Because his thing was creating LLCs and then running them. Like he would run it in her name and he would just be funneling money through it, and then he would strip it all out and move it to another LLC and just funnel money through that LLC. So she could, and he'd be like, sure, she can have that LLC, because the only thing it was created for was for him to funnel money through. So it wasn't like a legitimate business. But if it was a legitimate business and they were both on it, then she has a business interest to go after. So she's still, an owner in that business. So if it was a functioning hardware store, she's still half owner in that hardware store. It's not like it would affect her if they weren't married and he kicked her out. She still had a business interest to protect in the business, but her personal situation wouldn't have anything to do with that. If she was married, then they would figure out how to divide that business. Is he going to pay her out for that business, or is she going to buy him out of that business? Somebody has to buy somebody out if they're going to separate the business. So we do see that where one buys the other one out of the business. Or sometimes they just keep running the business together even after they get divorced. So a lot of times if a business is created around somebody's skill, so let's say he's a mechanic and they're 50-50 in that business, but it only exists because of his talent. That talent's attached to him. It's like he could just stop being a mechanic tomorrow and that business is worth nothing. And so a lot of times in law, it's like, well, how much is that business really worth? It's worth it because he's a mechanic, but she's not a mechanic, so it's kind of like, and he's like, oh, all of a sudden my hands hurt and I have arthritis. I don't really want to do that business anymore. So he'll just shut it down during the divorce because he doesn't want to be a mechanic all of a sudden. And so it loses its value. So it's different than having a brick and mortar business where you've got money coming in, you've got employees and things like that. If you have somebody who's running their own business, it's totally different. Yeah. Does that help a little? Yeah. Thank you. That was fun. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank Dawn. Yeah. Yeah, she let me go.
We're on a case from what, 2016, right?
Yeah.
She's still on this case. So talk about, and she, I gave her this case. It started off as a paying case, and now she's doing all this for free. And I'm always like, I'm sorry, but but we're trying to save kids from someone who was actually convicted of abuse, and he just keeps at it and keeps at it. And there's a special needs child involved, and you're just so family law can be a lot about just protecting children or having somebody who has just the shirt on their backs. It's I find it to be very honorable to try to do that. It's not just who gets the house.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it. And I remember going through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages too of bank records. Bank records. It's always in the bank records. It really is. So, well, thank you so much. And we have this, I think I already said, we have the event coming up, and I would like to have a meeting, or if people could contact me. 'Cause I have a lot to do to kind of set up for that, because I got a little overly ambitious with my goals, and I could use some help. So I want to ask for that. Am I forgetting anything, Sydney? Justice Court Tour, November 2nd. You have to RSVP because it is limited amount of folks that are invited to, that they can accommodate down there. But we've never toured the Justice Court before. We've been to federal, we've been to Superior, but it'd be kind of cool to go to Justice Court. I spend some time there with domestic violence court because there's a whole separate court for that. But I don't really know that whole court building. So I think that's going to be interesting. So hopefully everybody, it's pretty early. It's like at 8:30 in the morning. So please sign up and engage for that.
And does everyone sign?
And has everyone signed the signage? All right, I'll make sure you get that. Okay, I think we're good. We'll see you all next week. Okay.